We are incredibly honored this year to have two distinguished speakers addressing our assembly tonight who will help accentuate the goal of the ceremony, to honor both our active duty personnel as well as our nation's veterans. Our first speaker this evening is a true trailblazer for women serving in the military. Here to introduce her is Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Minus, U.S. Army retired, National Chair, DAR Project Patriot Committee. Colonel Minus.
Vice Admiral Michelle Howard is currently the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Operations Plans and Strategy. She is slated to be promoted to Admiral on July 1st, 2014, becoming the United States Navy's first female 4-star admiral. Truly a milestone. Truly a milestone in our military history. Making history is not new to Vice Admiral Howard. She made history in 1999 when she took command of the USS Rushmore, a 15,000-ton assault vessel with a crew of 300 sailors and 350 Marines, making her the first African-American woman to command a naval ship. She also commanded a Task Force C, and as the commander of this task force against piracy, she helped coordinate the rescue of Captain Richard Phillips, whose cargo ship was seized by Somali pirates in 2009. A 1978 graduate of Gateway High School in Aurora, Colorado, Vice Admiral Howard grew up in a military family. Her father, Clarence Howard, served as an Air Force Master Sergeant. Vice Admiral Howard is a 1982 graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and was their first female graduate to be selected for Admiral. She earned a degree in military arts and sciences from the Army's Command and General Staff College in 1998. Her first assignments in the United States Navy were on the USS Hunley and the USS Lexington, an aircraft carrier now serving as a floating museum in Corpus Christi, Texas. She has served in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, in the Adriatic in support of Operation Joint Endeavor in the former Yugoslavia, and she is a survivor of the September 11th attack on the Pentagon. She also participated in a tsunami relief effort in Indonesia, was the Navy liaison to the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Services, and also served as senior military assistant to the Secretary of the Navy. As a top-ranking officer and leader in today's Department of Defense, Vice Admiral Howard's service is an inspiration to all Americans. Her many historic milestones have not only helped to make a difference for future generations of women, but her extraordinary military career has impacted our nation's military history. Admiral Howard is married to Wayne Cowles, a retired Marine. Ma'am, we understand that there are significant world events going on right now that demand your attention. Thank you so much for being with us tonight and sharing your time, talent, and treasure. It is an honor to present Vice Admiral Michelle Howard.
Oh my. That was mischievous. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. So thank you for that warm welcome. And as someone who feels obligated to tell the truth, I must confess I'm in between jobs. I was relieved of duties yesterday as the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Ops Plans and Strategy, and it was quite a relief between Crimea, North Korea, Africa, little thing in Iraq. And then on Tuesday, I will assume the duties after I'm promoted to the Vice Chief of Naval Operations. So even more special when we find ourselves in the time in between to speak at an event like this. Even more special for me in the next 72 hours to have a moment to reflect on our veterans, the men and women who came before me. So thank you for this great moment of rumination and realization. So good evening. General Schwartz, I do need to say good evening. And so the DAR has given me an unexpected treat. I worked for General Schwartz for a year. Right at the start of OIF, I was his exec. He, for some reason, plucked me out of that, what was fondly called the bullpen. I'm still not sure about that name. But there are groups of lieutenant colonels and colonels, and he fondly pulled me up to the front office and asked me to serve for a little while, and I served under him for a year. And he is a true mentor and does not mind that I wear a different shade of blue. But I also want to say, when we talk about the connections of women, the other mentor I ended up having in that office was his wife, Miss Susie. So, Miss Susie, we did not recognize you tonight, but would you please stand? Because I do consider you a friend. And indeed, I am married, and it is our spouses who allow us to serve. But they are the ones who are the most honest and show us the way and keep us grounded. General Young, Brigadier General Vaught, fellow admirals and generals, members of the Daughters of the American Revolution, family and friends. America is a country born of activism, forged from revolution and committed to liberty. Our battle cry is a document of pure genius, the Declaration of Independence, and our guiding principle, the Constitution, is the work of some of the greatest thinkers this world has ever seen. And the United States has this unparalleled history of activism and, when necessary, revolutionary by and for her citizens. So this sacred legacy that tempers and infuses our national identity and shines a light of liberty as a guide for the entire world, well, from my perch up here, this is also the legacy of the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolutionary. There is a need for us to understand, celebrate, preserve, look to the past, and learn. That legacy was founded by the early citizen soldiers, militia members, and patriots of our nation, plain old folk, who recognized a problem and sought a higher vision for their government, people who were willing to pledge to each other their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, not for wealth, not for selfish ends, but for the truth, the self-evident truths of equality and inalienable rights to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And it is from this prolific and dynamic birth that you can trace throughout American history the heritage of our contemporary citizen soldiers, the folks whose sense of courage and duty composes the backbone of American national and military might. The initial American militiamen forged a country brave enough to throw off a government of despotism, but restrained enough to reconcile that revolution into a constitutional republic that was, is, and remains the envy of every citizen around the world. Then as now, it was an all-volunteer force of committed citizens. They were not professional soldiers, but they understood the importance of rights and allegiance to a purpose, ideals that benefit the individuals who make up the public. Let me start at that beginning. And I truly appreciate and thank DAR for picking this window to recognize our republic and her defenders. For this coming week, we will edge closer to the traditional 4th of July celebrations. And the road to independence started just a little bit earlier than that. Britain and the colonies had been in a state of war for almost a year when Richard Lee, a delegate from Virginia in June of 1776, moved that these united colonies are, and have of right, ought to be free and independent states. He led us to what is a defining American characteristic: decisive words and action. The next thing that happened is also enshrined in our American heritage. We formed a committee. But what a committee! John Adams, Roger Sherman, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, and Thomas Jefferson. The committee of 5 was to draft the reasons for independence and put it on paper, and Thomas Jefferson was the chief writer. His true sacrifice is that he willingly endured the editing of his fellow committee members. The final document was cut by 25% from the original. But the words that stayed were glorious. And by July 4th, the colonies officially declared independence. And in a letter to his beloved wife, Abigail, his partner, John Adams, wrote, "You will think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will maintain us to defend this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom, I can see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is worth more than the means, and that prosperity will triumph in these days of transaction." In addition to decisive words and actions, volunteerism is at the core of the United States' personal character and our national identity. The willingness to step up and contribute to any noble cause in your life is a sign of courage and selflessness. On a larger scale, the members of civil society who contribute to the national military effort both enable it and inform it. Because tonight's event is celebrating national defense, which we often think is the responsibility of just the military, but we all can see that throughout history, it is really about the careful stewardship of all the citizens. And we survive as a nation because our strength is not only the military, but the moral collective strength we achieve through the numbers of volunteers who choose to defend the Constitution, women and men who join or support their services not because they have to, but because they believe in the Constitution. These are my brothers and sisters in arms, brothers and sisters. And this audience is uniquely aware. In addition to our founding fathers, our mothers and sisters and aunts and daughters have been supremely vital to the protection of America through the years. I find it particularly important to understand their aspect of American heritage then and now. As one of the 4 founders of this society, Mary Lockwood, importantly asked, "Were there no mothers of the American Revolution?" She was right to ask that question. Most of the documents and words of the Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution are delivered in men's voices, fathers of the Revolution. By necessity, to understand the Revolution, the birth of America, and her defense across the centuries, we must understand the perspective of women. Women have been volunteering for and supporting military service, seeking to fulfill their duties to establish and defend the Constitution of this great country as long as men have. In fact, there is no conflict throughout America's history that women did not play a major role. And throughout the history of citizen soldiers in America, I would like to point out that women have never been conscripted. They have always been volunteers. Long before the all-volunteer force was created. Across the history of our nation, they would heal, feed, or support the war effort through a myriad of tasks, from code-breaking, flying aircraft, administrative duties, and industrial work, as well as openly demanding the right to fight. And this infrequently highlighted legacy is one of which I am proud to represent: those women, citizen soldiers, sailors, Marines, Coast Guard men, airmen, and civilians who contributed to making and keeping America free with their sacrifices. It is estimated that more than 220,000 women have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and more than 100 have been killed in those wars. And the last 14 years have only highlighted the fact that distinguishing between frontline fighters and rear support is challenging. Circumstances that the daughters of American Revolution and women prisoners from every American war could point out. So let me just highlight one woman who represents the modern citizen sailor, a volunteer and warrior, Captain Heidi Berg, U.S. Navy. She graduated from Annapolis in 1991. She's an intelligence officer who has a strong heritage of citizen soldier. Her grandfather flew biplanes in the Army in World War I. Her father retired as a captain in the Navy Reserve. She has brothers who served in the Navy and Marine Corps. Her husband is class of '85 from Annapolis and is my community surface warfare. And even her father-in-law was in the Navy and commanded a submarine. Captain Berg is also a mother of 3 daughters, and she is immensely proud of all 3. She deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 in support of the Army, and she understandably was concerned about her daughter's reaction to Mom being in harm's way. She was open and honest with her children about the war and why we were there. And during her deployment, her youngest, Bella, sent her a Valentine card, and it said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. I love you, Mommy. Go kick the Taliban butt." Thomas Jefferson and the Committee of 5 would have been proud. So I am grateful to your organization. You share the same passion that I, Captain Berg, her family, and all citizen soldiers and sailors have for education, historic preservation, and patriotism. You understand the special bravery and stubbornness it takes to hold women historical heroes high, to demand to hear women's voices through history, speaking American stories. Every year on the 4th of July, I reread the Constitution. It's a document I have sworn to defend, and it is important to me to complete that ritual. It's a document that millions of Americans, troops, reservists, guardsmen, nurses, and civil servants have labored directly to uphold and preserve. It is a document that has become more inclusive as our nation and our people have matured. The phrase, "we the people," started out by just referring to men and landowners, and now our Constitution includes all citizens regardless of race, religion, or national origin. It includes women. The greatest strength is now in the defined inclusiveness of the words, the phrase, "we the people," because it doesn't distinguish any part of the population from another. It gives equal and authority to all its citizens. This country can only maintain this awesome strength when we recognize and appreciate all of the people who keep this document and these ideals precious. Barbara Jordan, former Congresswoman from Texas, said it more eloquently. We only ask that when we stand up and talk about one nation under God, liberty and justice for everybody, we only want to be able to look at the flag, repeat those words, put our right hand over our hearts, and know that those words are true. in the end, we conclude that all citizens and we all serve and defend the country. And intrinsic to that defense is the role of the National Society, Daughters of the American Revolution. You educate and remind us of our inclusive American legacy. You remind us of Staff Sergeant Vincent Vetterkind, who, serving in Afghanistan, replied simply to a question. Out here, there is no male gender. There is no female gender. Out here, our gender is soldier. Out here in America, out here in this DAR hall, out here in front of me, in the land of ideals, in the land of those who love liberty, in the land where our blood is all the same color, our gender is American citizen. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral Howard, for your outstanding service and for sharing your experiences with us tonight. We are thrilled about your upcoming position and promotion. Thank you. Thank you, Colonel Minus. In keeping with tonight's theme of honoring our active duty personnel and veterans, our second speaker is General Norton Schwartz. Here to introduce him is Kathy Hanlon, National Chair, National Defense Committee. Mrs. Hanlon.
General Norton Schwartz, United States Air Force retired, graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1973 and served on active duty for almost 40 years, retiring as the 19th Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force in 2012. His remarkable career included participation in the 1975 airlift evacuation of Saigon and service as the Chief of Staff of the Joint Special Operations Task Force in northern Iraq in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm in 1991. He was commander of the Special Operations Command Pacific, as well as Alaskan Command, Alaskan North American Aerospace Defense Command Region, and the 11th Air Force. As Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Schwartz was responsible for the organization, training, and equipping of 680,000 active duty, Guard, Reserve, and civilian Air Forces serving in the United States and overseas. As a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he advised the Secretary of Defense, National Security Council, and the President of the United States on national security issues. At this moment, there are dozens of unmanned aircraft flying high above Afghanistan and other locations around the world. General Schwartz is credited with advancing these remotely piloted aircraft, more commonly known as drones. With his impressive military record and more than 4,400 flying hours in various aircraft, he has earned numerous awards and accolades, a couple of which are the Defense Distinguished Service Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, the Air Force Distinguished Service Medal, and the Air Force Outstanding Unit Award with Valor Device and 3 oak leaf clusters. General Schwartz currently serves as the President and CEO of Business Executives for National Security. Please join with me in welcoming General Norton Schwartz.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, please sit down. Unlike Michelle Howard, I appreciate a standing ovation in advance because you might not give it to me on the back end. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and it is truly an honor to be here and to share this very special event with you tonight. And first, I'd like to thank Kathy for the warm and gracious introduction. And Kathy, your leadership as the National Chair of the National Defense Committee, as well as your leadership of the Daughters of the American Revolution in your own home state of Texas is truly noteworthy. America's active duty military veterans and families are far, far better off because of the selfless dedication that you and all DAR members have for those who have and do wear the uniform. The National Defense Night ceremony recognizes great leaders who have made significant contributions to support troops and veterans. This evening's recipients, whether active duty military personnel or volunteers who want to give back, have given so much. They are an inspiration to us all. And I can't overemphasize the importance of your work for the men and women of the United States Armed Forces. Your dedication helps maintain morale during times of great challenge and hardship. And with full support of the Daughters of the American Revolution and its national network of thousands of patriots, let me just say that the difference that each one of you make every day matters. It really matters. The reputation of America's military, ladies and gentlemen, is the result of many factors. Members of our all-volunteer force join because individuals want to serve the country they know and they love. Because military service gives them countless personal and professional opportunities. And because they know that their fellow Americans have their backs even in the worst of times. Ladies and gentlemen, not far from where we gather tonight, just steps from this magnificent Constitution Hall, lies the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. This simple yet beautiful landmark honors the memory of U.S. service members who fought in the Vietnam War, who died in service in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia, and those, yes, who remain missing in action. Over 58,000 names bring us back to that time of tumult and heroism, a time familiar to so many Americans, including me. I enrolled in not the Naval Academy, Michelle, but the Air Force Academy in 1969. Sorry. A little bit of friendly jest here, y'all. And graduated in 1973. At the tail end, yes, of the Vietnam War, America had been embroiled in a long, bitter, and yes, controversial conflict on the other side of the world. Thousands of our fellow Americans, classmates, friends, family, neighbors served, and many were left with the scars of war, scars that remain with so many even to this day. And as a young pilot and recent Air Force Academy graduate, one of my first missions happened to involve a closing chapter of that war, the American evacuation from Saigon. In that airlift, we did our best to bring American military and civilian personnel out of harm's way. Because Americans, as Americans, we never leave a teammate behind, and that included Captain Phillips in Michelle's command. Yet the country these heroes came home to was different than the one that they left. The physical and emotional wounds were real, as was the ambivalence and at times the hostility that greeted them. Some had strong support of their families and of government institutions chartered to help them. Others were not so fortunate. In the Vietnam War, if the Vietnam War taught us anything, and I believe it taught us many lessons, is that Americans can and must do a better job for our veterans. No one who has worn the uniform should ever be homeless. No one who has served in battle should have extreme difficulty finding employment. No one suffering from physical and mental injuries should suffer from substandard care. And no one's bravery, service, and sacrifice should ever be forgotten. In the decades following Vietnam, our government and the nonprofit sector addressed many of the problems plaguing veterans returning from combat overseas. We've made progress, but as recent headlines remind us, our institutions tasked with helping our heroes are imperfect. That's why our efforts, spearheaded by the Daughters of the American Revolution, are so crucial, so very critical. I don't need to remind you of your important work because you are engaged in it every day, and you have a long and proud tradition of supporting our active duty military and veterans. Whether sending care packages to troops stationed abroad, volunteering at VA hospitals, distributing meals to homeless veterans, or consoling military families, your work, ladies, is consequential. So when I think what do I think about DAR members as civilians how can they best help our country's troops and veterans? My message is quite simple, actually. It's keep up the good works, you all. Keep up the good works. Keep looking for more ways to meaningfully donate your time and treasure to the various government institutions and nonprofit organizations focused on serving these outstanding Americans. Encourage your family members, your friends, neighbors, and community leaders to get involved and to consider such service such as yours as well. One thing I've noticed is that there is a bit of distance between the civilian sector and the military. Our entire armed forces and their immediate families make up a very small proportion of our society, and as a result, don't often witness firsthand the challenges active military service members and their families face. DAR members can help bridge that gap by connecting the broader American civil society to issues that impact the military. Additionally, there are many groups around the country that offer unique targeted services to our active duty military personnel, veterans, and their families. Take, for example, the Fisher House, an organization in which I know many of you are involved and which benefits greatly from the support of DAR. It's an organization whose mission is especially meaningful to me and to my wife, Susie. Susie is here with me tonight. Michelle was kind enough to introduce her, and before I continue, I must mention that she is an inspiration to so many military families. I could tell a few stories tonight about her tireless devotion to them and the impact of her work. Susie sits on the board of trustees of Fisher House, and for those of you who perhaps are not familiar with this outstanding nonprofit, let me just fill you in quickly. Fisher House runs a network of comfortable housing around the country at U.S. military and VA hospitals where military and veteran families can stay at no cost when a loved one is receiving medical care and treatment. In 2013 alone, the Fisher House served more than 22,000 families, and since its inception, it has saved an estimated $235 million in out-of-pocket expenses for lodging and transportation amongst the beneficiary population. Fisher House is but one example. It is but one example of the organizations and the philanthropies that exist to serve the military, veterans, and their families. And lucky for us, there are many more. I ask each of you, each one of you, to find a way to get involved in these groups, whether in your local community or at the national level. In closing, let me say how motivating it is to stand here on this stage with the President General, who will soon present the United States of America Vietnam War commemoration, paying tribute to the service and sacrifice of Vietnam veterans, personnel, POWs, and those missing in action, helps heal the valiant survivors and honor the memory of those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe it's almost 50 years since the official start of the ground war in Vietnam. Commemorations like this send a strong message to those who served and to those families and loved ones. They are not and will never be forgotten. And in the past, decades, veterans of World War II and Korea, and like them, our Vietnam veterans are now approaching their golden years. They will need special kinds of support, and I have no doubt that groups like DAR will be there every step of the way, facilitating critical services, honoring their memory, and keeping their stories of bravery and heroism alive. On behalf of all those who have served and those who continue to serve, thank you for the privilege to speak to you this evening, along with my dear and remarkable friend, Admiral Michelle Howard. And I must say one thing. On Tuesday morning, Michelle will take the oath. She will say that she swears allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, not to sovereigns, not to kings, not even to presidents, but to the Constitution of the United States. And my only regret is that I will not be able to administer that oath to you Tuesday morning. And so Susie and I are humbled to be in your presence of so many patriotic Americans who put service to country first and who helped make the Daughters of the American Revolution such a well-respected and instrumental organization. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much.
Thank you, General Schwartz, for your outstanding service and for sharing your experiences with us tonight, as well as inspiring us to do even more. Thank you, Mrs. Hanlon. The DAR Patriot Award is presented to individuals who have provided extraordinary service to protect America's freedom. We are so inspired by the unfailing commitment to the defense of our nation by these two American military icons. We are honored to present the DAR Patriot Award to Admiral Michelle Howard and General Norton Schwartz.